Before AI, the workplace was in a pyramid structure, and now it's in a diamond structure. You're very professional. We're eroding to the junior level positions. They're not getting deleted. They're not getting removed. They're eroding.
If you remove the bottom layer, you have to answer a really hard question, which is where is the next generation of middle layer experts going to come from?
These AI companies are getting valued at these huge numbers for the reason that I don't think that they're being valued on projected growth. I think they're being valued on replacing the entire workforce.
The entire world at the moment is being held hostage by big tech because they threw this technology out there and nobody knows exactly how is that going to affect us.
90% of people used to be farmers. They got replaced by machines. Did jobs disappear? Work did disappear. Jobs didn't. People found other things to do and we advanced as a society. Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea. I write the Art of Asking Questions on Substack.
An idea I've never thought of, and I was just briefly speaking to Andrea about this before the stream. Before AI, the workplace was in a pyramid structure, and now it's in a diamond structure. And we'll get into exactly what that means. I'm sure most of you could probably gather where this conversation is going to go, but there's some interesting details, and Andrea also has a cool diagram, like a share screen to show. So let's hop into it.
Yes, I think as you've described, lots of companies before AI have been working in a pyramid structure. And the idea behind the structure is to leverage junior labor. So basically, there is a wide base of junior people. So in consultancy, professional services, which is what I do, that means analysts and researchers who do some research, some modeling, documentation. Then you've got a middle layer of managers that coordinate, translate, and review that work. And the pyramid obviously slopes upwards. So there are fewer managers than there are researchers. And then at the top, you have partners, company owners that are selling, managing relationships, and making judgment calls. And the idea behind this approach is that the more work there is, the more people you need. And so growth means that you hire more people and the pyramid gets bigger and bigger, but still under the same principle that the top remains relatively small compared to the middle and the bottom. And what's especially interesting about this is the idea of information asymmetry, in that juniors gather data and seniors interpret it. So there is a pretty significant gap in terms of function, exposure to information, and the tasks that different people used to do.
So it's funny because when you sent me this, well, okay, pyramid, diamond, first thing that came to mind was like, okay, I guess AI is replacing junior level positions just right away. And then I opened up the Perplexity link that you sent. And I think that was there's more detail than that, but that was one of the main points, right? Is that correct, Andrea?
Yes, that's right. And the so the idea is that the AI so far hasn't been disrupting the pyramid entirely. So because clients pay consultancies, professional services for judgment, the top is still as valuable as it used to be. You need people with a lot of experience, strong network, who can help clients interpret what's happening to them and make strategic recommendation. So what AI has been affecting is the bottom of the pyramid. And what I would say is that it has been eroding it. It hasn't been replacing it fully so far. So there's AI is doing a lot of research, synthesis, drafting, modeling that some juniors used to do, and junior cohorts that in top consultancies numbered in the hundreds of people are shrinking pretty fast. And let me see if I can share something on screen now. You'll have to let me know if it works because I can't tell.
It
Um,
works.
Great. So as you can see, this is the evolution of the pyramid. And up there you can see the source where this image is from. This was the traditional pyramid, and AI and automation have been eroding these two bits on the side, and so the shape has been changing. So the rest of the pyramid for now hasn't changed massively. But yeah, the erosion at the bottom is a real thing.
It's interesting. I think it's interesting also your choice of wording because you're very professional. It's like you're on your lunch break, you're very professional. We're eroding to the junior level positions. They're not getting deleted. They're not getting removed. Eroding. It's almost like the sand and the beach. It's just slowly the water's coming in slowly, and eventually, like that's I don't know, stupid example. Like I live in Long Island, New York, right? And there's certain places like the water is just there's no more sand. And I think eventually that's probably what's going to happen. I actually, all I could say is I hope not. I really hope not. I think it's cool to actually the image, maybe slightly off topic here, but I'll mention this and then we'll keep going on the topic. You're a business guy. You're in consulting, so you'll understand this, and I think a lot of the audience will understand this as well. The big AI companies are planning some IPO soon, right? And their projected valuations are like beyond the sky. They're on the moon. They're on a different planet. I've seen $1 trillion OpenAI. If that's the case, again, not a financial advisor, and I don't play around in the markets, but I will play around. If they IPO at 1 trillion, I will take my pants off and I will put on my shorts. Not recommending that to anybody, but the reason I'm mentioning this is for this reason. When we're talking about eroding junior positions, these AI companies are getting valued at these huge numbers for the reason that I don't think that they're being valued on projected growth. I think they're being valued on replacing the entire workforce. So it's interesting to see, okay, if they're going to replace the entire workforce, and based on what you're saying here, the junior level positions are eroding, right? But middle management, upper management, whatever the correct terminology is for it, and CEOs, they're still there, right? They're not being replaced. And I think that's probably because they're the ones making the decisions, right? So it'll be interesting to see. I think that a lot of these companies that are actually maybe getting rid of too many junior positions, it might backfire. Maybe it already has started to. And I think also AI might be an excuse for some of these larger companies that may be overhired, regardless of AI. What do you think about that, Andrea?
I think it's a very interesting observation, and it's what I find especially interesting is that Anthropic now is having to deal with the fact that they haven't invested sufficiently in infrastructure because they have these mad valuations, but then Anthropic has been reducing the usage limits for Claude. Just yesterday, they were trialing removing Claude Code from Pro subscription, which for me would have been an instant unsubscribe. Fortunately, there was enough backlash from the developer community that they seem to have gone back on their decision. But the problem remains that the infrastructure is not there, and or at least they haven't procured enough of it. And the other side is that I don't know if you're following the how computer companies, mobile phone manufacturers, they're all either increasing the prices hugely or delaying announcements by a year or more because there's a shortage of memory because all of it is being invested in these technologies that clearly have value, but their ability to replace humans has is far from having been proven. So it I think there's a lot of potential, but we've not yet seen that real ability to fully replace junior people. Replacing fully junior people brings lots of other problems in terms of career development and leadership pipelines. But even if we found a way to deal with that, uh, at the moment, I work at a consultancy company. We could not replace our junior colleagues with AI. We simply could not. And I use AI a lot. I can tell it's changed massively in the last 3 months, 6 months, year, but it still
Right.
cannot fully replace my colleagues,
Right.
human colleagues.
For now, we'll see what
Yeah.
the future holds. I don't know. It's tricky. I'm not the biggest fan of replacing the entire workforce personally. So as we continue through this topic, I know Andrea is still in preview mode for some reason, so we can't see the chat. Usually I wait till the end to respond to the chats, but I think actually since they're on topic, I'll read them off and then we'll keep following along with this topic. Let's see. Chad says, we're seeing the opposite happening in my organization, hiring hundreds of entry level as they learn AI isn't effective at replacing people, but supports them instead. I think that's such a great point. What do you think about that, Andrea?
Yeah, I think that sort of consideration really relies on having enough work. If you've got a lot of work and you can hire junior people with much higher productivity than they would have had in a pre-AI world, yeah, I can clearly see that happening. It really depends on what you do, and there are jobs where the bar for good enough is set at a level where a junior person with AI will do far more than good enough, and that's perfect. Whereas, yeah, for what I do, what AI can do is not good enough. And then it's more than that. Clients are paying for something else. So I could not give them something that is AI generated essentially. But yeah, I can certainly see contexts and companies where this makes a lot of sense. And if we want to broaden the conversation even more, just this morning I was listening to a podcast about the relationship between humans and robots. Not as in people and robots having a relationship, but how humans can live with robots. And part of that focused on, for example, robots that do surgery or robots that could, I don't know, serve you coffee. There are lots of applications where AI and automation together can do a fantastic job. And actually, the speaker in that podcast was making the point that when it comes to certain types of surgery, you should actually trust a robot more than you trust a human because that robot has been developed to operate at a level of precision that we can't manage. It's just not human to operate like that. So, yeah, I think, long story short, depending on what you do, I can certainly see how that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. And to just to touch on that as well, I think at least for me, I don't use AI too much in my actual business or workplace. I have used it a bit. It's not fully necessary, but I will say outside of my workplace, I don't consider Substack or YouTube work. I really enjoy it. Obviously, I, it's fun to me. So I don't really consider it work. But ever since I have been using AI, I'm busier than ever. So I think actually they might need to reconsider what junior level positions should be responsible for. And again, how to grow with AI rather than be replaced by AI. And let's see, Peter says this is why young people are anti AI because their career ladder is broken now. And I think that there's definitely some truth to that. It's a little concerning. And I want young people to be inspired rather than be anti AI, be inspired by it. And hopefully the job market doesn't go to a place where they're so against it for the reason of being replaced. Yeah, we'll keep going with the topic and we'll keep getting to the chats as well as we go. I understand the concern of the younger generation. I think if you are concerned, I think the best thing to do is to really dive into the AI world and I guess become more familiar with the tools. I've spoken to other creators, like for example, Sam Illingworth, who pointed out that actually people that have AI experience statistically have a 4.5 times income gap between people that don't and people that do. So you definitely you add that on your resume, you bring a lot of value to the table. So yeah, I sorry, go ahead, Andre.
No, I just want to add there's also a lot of socioeconomic inequality in that the people who are more likely to have significant experience with AI are also more likely to have a certain level of education, a certain type of job. And so, in that way, AI can also make the gap between the richest and the poorest, or the more or less advantage wider, which is certainly not a positive outcome.
That's an interesting point because I would think it's actually that it would actually close the gap because now to be educated, you don't necessarily need a bunch of money for a degree. It's almost, at least on my end, and this is even before AI, for example, like in computer science and coding before AI, I was seeing people getting hired that on their own learned how to code and became better coders than people with degrees and then got better jobs. because the companies didn't care about the degree, they cared about how good you are, just period. So I think maybe on the other end of that, to just say the opportunity now is instead of paying thousands and thousands of dollars for a college degree, which I'm not against college. I just think that also, and again, thanks to Sam Illingworth for pointing this out, because I wouldn't know. He's a professor in university, so he sees this every day. The universities are just lost in terms of AI and integrating AI into education. Instead of teaching people how to use it, a lot of the times they're actually preventing people from using it, punishing them for using it. And it's so counterintuitive. It's like they're like professors are using AI to help them grade and to help them find out if somebody else used AI for a certain project and then punishing them for using it. So it's interesting because professors are using it, the students are being punished for using it. So I think higher education in general, I think it's just lost in this AI world right now. Um, yeah,
I work in research and higher education. I'm sitting at a university campus right now. I mean, it's true that the sector is a bit lost, but it's also experimenting a lot. And I think the thinking is evolving rapidly. Practice and policy aren't, because institutional governance is actually a complex beast. It's very slow, very big, very complicated. So it's things that will take time. But yeah, there are various universities that are experimenting with new forms of assessment, going back to relying on oral presentation as opposed to can you write 2,000 words on topic, and or doing group work and group presentation. So there are lots of ways in which assessment can be reconsidered. At the same time, there are some disciplines in which it's a lot harder to do that. So it's a developing picture, I would say.
yeah. I guess the tough part is because AI is moving so fast, the systems around it are
Yeah,
moving too slow.
yeah.
Cause and effect there. And we'll get to more chats as well, but just to keep going on this. So based on this new diamond structure, basically what that means is now the middle really becomes the company, especially as the bottom keeps eroding. So what does that look like when middle management, upper management becomes the company, Andrea?
Yeah, so the role can change quite dramatically depending on how big or small the base layer is. But essentially, the middle layer starts to manage junior employees less and less, and it starts managing the outputs of AI workflows more and more. And that means all sorts of things, anything from a chatbot to agents to automations and other sorts of AI enabled functionality. And I think what you were describing before in terms of careers includes reflections on professional identity. So the fact that people in the past, still today, might have considered themselves as I am a manager of people, whereas in the future the role might look more like that of an orchestrator. So orchestrating the efforts of humans and machines at the same time, designing and overseeing AI agents, applying judgment where automation can't apply any judgment or take responsibility what it creates, and owning the outcomes of whatever comes out of the combination, the orchestration of humans and machines. And so the idea is that you end up with a pretty thick expert middle, and you start eroding and losing that wider base. But it's just a different way of working, and in many ways, it's only a very small number of companies that would have changed dramatically how they operate. The vast majority have seen the impact of this change, but it's not been massive so far.
Makes sense. That makes sense. So I think this is another really interesting point that you brought up in this topic and how kind of the shape is still changing. So from pyramid to diamond to something that you called the obelisk. And this is interesting because if you think about the original structure, which was the pyramid, and it's funny because a lot of times people hear pyramid and they think like pyramid schemes. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just how companies used to be structured versus what they're becoming. And I think the interesting thing is if we, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like if we're going from pyramid to diamond to obelisk, which we'll get into what the obelisk means, eventually it seems like people that progress from junior levels to higher levels, they will disappear, and therefore, will the company disappear? It's like initially you have the junior level, which maybe a select few rise up in that pyramid to middle management to upper management to C suites, right?
Yeah.
If you erode the junior level completely, eventually those higher levels will die out, maybe even literally, right? When people get old, they want to retire, they're done. And then you don't have anybody to replace them. And you haven't trained anybody. And it's not necessarily even about training. I think it seems, um, at least in my opinion, I think the best leaders are formed through experience. So without that experience and no more junior level positions, there's nobody really to rise to the top. So what do you think?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. If you remove the bottom layer, you have to answer a really hard question, which is where is the next generation of middle layer experts going to come from? And then those are usually the people that go to the top, not necessarily in the same company, but in other companies. So it's a vertical progression. The accumulation of experience over time, which you've described, is still essential. And I think none of the companies that are going through these transformations have figured this out, to be honest. We are all trapped in this ever changing landscape that the big tech companies are basically. They have disrupted how work works, and they haven't offered any idea as to what happens next. Now, the Anthropic CEO talks about the risk of job loss. There's a lot of talk about risk here, risk there. Eventually, there will have to be some sort of public engagement or policy intervention that rectifies this picture. In that, if you think about it, the entire world at the moment is being held hostage by big tech because they threw this technology out there and nobody knows exactly how is that going to affect us, how is that going to affect the environment. I just read before this live that something like 6 AI campuses in the US that are powered by gas turbines to make electricity are likely to pollute more than the entire country of Morocco. Like, what word is that? And still we keep building. It's so yeah, I think there are still lots of questions that need to be answered. And it feels like we're in a transitional period because when you think about it, we didn't have generative AI just a few years ago. And now we're nowhere near the end of generative AI. It just started. And so naturally there's a lot where we just don't have the answer.
Before I answer a couple of these chats, could you get into what the obelisk actually means in terms of that structure?
Certainly. Yeah. First of all, the obelisk is not my own invention, but it is something that has been discussed as part of business and management conversation. So the idea is that the obelisk, I don't know if you're familiar with obelisks. The obelisks are those kind of pointy towers that the ancient Egyptians used to make. I go to Rome to see my family during the holidays, and there's lots of obelisks in Rome. And so the idea is that it is a tall and narrow structure. There are fewer layers compared to the pyramid or the diamond, and the teams tend to be smaller. So there's a small group of senior partners or principals at the top who lead the company. Then there's a thinner middle layer of highly skilled engagement architects. So these are people that work with clients and manage the work of AI. And then there is almost nothing below them. In a way, you could see it like a very small pointy tower. So there's almost nothing below this layer because the work is mainly handled by AI agents that run in the background. This is the most extreme form of the obelisk. It's worth noting that most organizations moving in this direction still include a small base layer, so with more junior individuals. And you can describe those as AI facilitators. So these are early career consultants or professionals who are technically fluent in how AI works and they are able to work with AI confidently, but they don't know the subject matter where the company works well enough to take responsibility for it. So they're very skilled AI operators, but you couldn't ask them to do the job of the middle layer just yet. And I suppose the main difference between the diamond and the obelisk is that the diamond is something that has been happening to company, whereas the obelisk is more intentional. It's something that some company are trying to design and move towards. I think that, yeah, that perspective is probably the biggest difference here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just an idea that popped into my head here. When you think about these structures, or even if you just think about the screen share that Andrea shared, which was the diamond, it represents humans in the workforce, right? So let's think about this in two ways. If you only think about this in terms of humans and you think about the structure and just like the physics of it, just the reality of, let's say, a structure like the obelisk, where at some point the middle is larger than the bottom, right? Or even eventually, maybe even the top. That structure would fall in reality because it doesn't have a base, right? That would just be the physics of it. That structure should topple over. But I think the key point here is maybe it's not that obviously the structure is changing, but it's changing in terms of humans to machines. So now the base level is machines. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the structure will fall because it still has a base. It's just the base is being replaced. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And replacing this base raises. So, if you try to replace the base at scale, so across an entire country, across a region of the world, there is a big question about the availability of basically compute capabilities. Do we have enough digitally to make this whole thing work? And I was also reading the other day that some companies, because they're worried about the current shortages of memory, are hoarding compute time. So they buy massive amounts of compute from tech providers, and that has a very low utilization rate. So, say it's like you buy 100 computer hours and you only use three. And so there are lots of questions here about, is it possible to replace the bottom layer at scale? And I think here it's important to be clear about what do we mean by this, because we're not talking about a bunch of people using ChatGPT. We're talking about agents, and we're talking about large scale automation. So yeah, I think we could probably live with a larger number of people just using chats. But what we're talking about is very complex evolution of companies over time.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's probably why AI agents are probably the largest development for now. And if as that becomes more accessible at scale, I'll give a quick example of this and we'll get into a couple chats here. We'll answer some questions. I'll give an example. Andrea, have you heard of NemoClaw from NVIDIA? So if for people that haven't, if you go to Google, type in NemoClaw and you go to the website, I believe it's still in preview mode. But NVIDIA is just so smart to think about this. If this is the direction that we're moving in, then these large corporations at scale need to be able to deploy AI agents safely, securely, make sure that they have all their context in check and that these agents won't go rogue, for example, or not follow the instructions directly. I'll just give a brief background on EmoClaw as well, but it's almost like I always give this example for the general audience because a lot of people don't even know what AI agents are or that they exist. In the general population, most people aren't even thinking about AI. They don't realize that a lot of the things that are happening now in the real world, they would probably think is like a Black Mirror episode. It's like a scary movie, but there's a lot of things that are happening that are really crazy right now. Dive down the rabbit hole. But the easiest example I could give before I just touch on NemoClaw and why I think it's important. If anybody's ever used like Dropbox to share like a folder, all right, or whatever it might be, there's many different tools like Dropbox, but Dropbox I think is the simplest one. If you've ever shared a folder, you have the option to share that folder on view only or edit, right? So if I'm sending my tax documents to my accountant and I say view only, he doesn't have the option to edit those documents. So the instructions are very clear. There's no real loophole. There's no way around it. It's human to human. Imagine now in the AI agent world, you want to have it do some task, execute on some task for you. And you say, I want you to only be able to view this information and then come back to me. And then I will tell you if I want you to execute on it. If you don't have proper context and your instructions are too vague, it will actually not be on view only. It will be in edit mode, for example. And I think that's the simplest example of an email where it's like you can say to it, don't share any emails with my credit card information, right? But it won't share it, but it might forward it because forwarding is different than sharing in terms of the actual exact instructions. So, whereas a human would know sharing and forwarding is the same thing. If you're telling me not to share credit card information, I won't share it. I won't forward it. Nobody else will have access to this. But AI agents are a little bit more complicated. And then back to NemoClaw. Right now, you have a lot of people, one person building businesses with AI agents, zero employees. These large companies to deploy AI agents at scale need a system that is safe and secure. And NemoClaw, for that reason, I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me is basically it's a platform for you to run OpenClaw style agents. That's the definition of what NemoClaw is. And it starts with zero permissions. And the crazy thing about starting with zero permissions is imagine that you deploy an AI agent, you give it its first instructions. It will come back to you every single time and ask you, is this okay? Is that okay? And then you have to build it from scratch. So these large companies that want to use AI agents, they have to build them from scratch. It will be probably a slow process with a lot of humans working on it to ensure that these AI agents are doing the right thing for these large companies. Yeah. Anything on that, Andrea, before we hop into some chats?
No, no, I think that, it's very interesting. Yeah, viewers might have heard about, quite a lot of controversy around OpenClaw and data being exposed or inappropriate information being shared because the security settings weren't set up properly by users. So there were lots of really cool automations, people using Telegram to text their AI, but then exposing sensitive information. And NemoClaw is it's a really good solution towards that. I mean, developed by NVIDIA, and it looks good. I've not tried it myself, but I read a lot about it, and it seems like a very solid solution for this.
Absolutely. There's an even recent example, again, that I heard of from Sam Illingworth that actually Microsoft is planning on having an AI agent living on your taskbar if you have Windows 11. And that's the interesting thing about this whole story of AI agents. A lot of people just jumped into it, and that's great. A lot of people are doing amazing things with them. But I think to actually like fully deploy to the public and fully deploy at scale to large corporations, there's going to have to be some level of trust. Now, my personal computer is a Mac, right? But in my office, we all are on Windows. If I all of a sudden saw an AI agent sitting on my taskbar on Windows by Microsoft, I wouldn't even think twice about using it. I would just use it. If I had a use case, I'd be like, oh, this is for Microsoft? Okay, good. Let's jump in. Let's try it. Yeah,
Mhm.
let's see. Peter says not all jobs are equal in complexity. Juniors in consulting are hard to replace because that industry requires analytical mix with critical thinking. But a junior marketer, a junior HR person, junior finance, question mark. What do you think, Andrea?
No, I think that's a fact. It is not to put down people in other roles. I think there's actually quite a lot of complexity in some of these other roles. Though, I can see how some functions of those roles can be more easily automated. It's the features of consultancy. Consultancy requires judgment from the most junior to the most senior level, whereas putting together some draft social media messages might not. And so I think that is something that that is much easier to automate in principle. Yeah, I agree, and in a way, not even consultancy is fully protected from that. I think in a few minutes we talk about another model called the platform, which I think will show that all professional services are in fact exposed.
Yeah, and we'll dive into the platform as well. I'm interested to hear. I think in terms of that comment specifically, I'm not a marketer, not really a finance guy. I've spoken about HR before on streams, and some of the comments that I've seen are like a big question mark on that one because it's like HR is human resources.
Yeah.
That gets replaced by AI. Imagine you walk into an office and there's an AI chatbot replacing human resources. That really sounds like a Black Mirror episode to me. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
That said, in the last live that we did, we shared a case study of a company that was able to automate a very large percentage of their HR queries. So the basic HR queries, so that the human HR people could focus on the more complex cases. So yeah, it is human resources, and it sounds a bit dystopian in some ways, but yeah, it's in a way, once upon a time, whenever you called a call center, there would be a person on the other end. And then we moved on to a robot voice that would tell you, to speak with purchases, please press one. And then now you're speaking to AI chatbot. So I think companies will find the easiest thing to automate, and they will automate them.
Yeah, that was a great robot voice.
Thank you. I practiced
Uh,
for an hour before I called.
Yeah, yeah. You want to make sure you're not replaced. You could be the robot. I want to get into the platform as well. I'll just read off a couple more chats and then we'll get into the platform. So basically, Chad says our organization is essentially an infinite amount of work in the most highly regulated space in the world. AI gets to support all the stuff demanded by its staff day to day, but not necessarily the deliverable of their position. It's an interesting take. I wonder what that field is exactly. An infinite amount of work.
Sometimes my work feels like an infinite amount of work. So
That's interesting. Let's see. Dr. Linda Mary Noble says, raises the question of purpose and identity, which I fully resonate with, and reminiscent of the Industrial Revolution prior to reforms. Yeah, it's you see a lot of these big AI companies actually talking about replacing the whole workforce as part of their mission statement, which is a little scary to think about. And I think that kind of gets into the conversation of if we do actually enter a world where people don't have to work, what does that look like? Not everybody is a creative. A lot of people find purpose in the workplace. And I don't necessarily think that's a road that we want to go down where people don't work. You know, on that, Andrea?
yeah, it's a very strange and interesting topic at the same time. I love reading science fiction, and I read a series of books that was exactly focusing on that. So a world where people don't work anymore, and everybody has everything that they need. And so that creates social unrest because it's genuinely hard. Like you said, some people will be creative, some people will find something to do that they like and is aligned with their natural tendencies. But yeah, other people do find their identity in work. And I agree. I don't think that's where we want to head, the direction we want to head in. But also, could we make work more easier? Could we have less work to do? Because for the time being, my experience of having AI that I've got more stuff to do in the same time as before. So I am more burdened and more stressed, not less. The question is AI actually going to, positively impact my work environment? Because it has very positively impacted my capabilities and what I can do and how fast I can work. But the impact of my experience of work is not a net positive. And I think that is quite concerning, and that there is probably a very long conversation to be had on that topic. So, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Then just a couple more here from Dr. Linda Mary. RB mapping to data points of performance or structure sustained by and built from values, and then um, life is emergent and contingent. Contextual complexity will require oversight by human intelligence and a heart-centered approach to avert risk. I think that kind of just gets into the human in the loop type of
yeah,
conversation, which I think is so essential. We can't fully be replaced by machines, can we?
not yet, but
Yes. Yeah, I hope not. So let's dive into this last topic here because we're talking about shapes. You know, we went pyramid, we went diamond, we went obelisk. Now
yeah.
the platform, which basically what I have here from Andrea's notes, something that is just completely alien from a traditional firm. There's no shape. So what does that look like, Andrea?
Yeah, the platform is more of a hypothesis than an established way of working, but some companies are thinking about this, and it is, yeah, by far the furthest departure from anything that we know today. So the idea would be that companies, instead of building a team to deliver the work, they build infrastructure. So that could mean lots of different things. You need data, you need compute, you need AI workflows, you need automations, and you still have humans sit on top of that infrastructure, and they act as orchestrators as opposed to doers, which is what most companies look like today. So the humans worry about having relationships with other humans. They set the strategy, and they do obviously play a role when judgment is needed. So in professional services, but also in other fields, there is always a need for somebody to take a decision and especially to take responsibility. But everything else essentially just runs in the background. And a good way to think about it is a software as a service, in that um, basically, if you run a software as a service company, or it could be Substack, for example. Actually, it's not software as a service. Imagine, I don't know, Office 365, Microsoft Word, and the like. So Microsoft is not going to hire more engineers if new people sign up. The product scales, the infrastructure scales, and keeps running in the background. Obviously, they still need engineers at Microsoft because it's a tech company. But if you translate that type of example in consultancy, and you have strong data, strong workflow, and strong analytics, then you can see a case where the machines, the computing layer, so to say, does all the thinking, if you can call it that, and reasoning. And then people at the top pick things up and take them to clients. And so overall, you end up in a place where revenue can grow without headcount necessarily having to grow with it. There is obviously a point where you do need more human orchestrators to take the information from the computing layer. But yeah, there is a lot of opportunity for growth. But there is a risk here, and it's a big one, which is the fact that creating a type of infrastructure and technological IP is very costly. This is a very intentional model, like the obelisk. It's not something you just drift into. You just need to deliberately design it. You need to invest, and you need to trial. So it's something that takes time, and lots of organizations are talking about it. I'm not aware of anybody who's actually made such a drastic transition at this point.
Yeah, super interesting. I think to make an example and to also just talk about this economically for a second here, I'll give the example first. Let's say AI is the best thing since, I don't know, more than the internet, more than anything else. Is one specific example in history, which I mentioned other streams, where 90% of the workforce was replaced. And that example is farming. 90% of people used to be farmers. They got replaced by machines. Did jobs disappear? Work did disappear. Jobs didn't. People found other things to do and we advanced as a society. And I think sometimes people push back on this and they say, well, you're comparing artificial intelligence into farming machines. I think the reason it's a good example is because if this, if the future actually, even the near future actually looks something along the lines of 90% of people losing their jobs, I don't think that means that work disappears. I think that it's hard for us to imagine what that future actually looks like. And I think that history may repeat itself again. And there's a lot of fear that comes with uncertainty and unpredictability. But I'm actually optimistic that people will live actually more fulfilling lives, not because they won't have to work and because they can do whatever they want and get a check from the government or whatever every month to live. I think that people will have a new purpose in life, similarly to that farming example. And I think also something to consider here is that if I'm wrong, economically, this is something that's completely unprecedented. Because in order for these companies to be successful, uh, they need to have customers, right? And if people don't have money to spend, then they won't have customers, and then there won't be any revenues. So I don't think one works without the other. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
idea.
It all comes back down to good old capitalism. You can't grow if you can't sell. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right that unless we have some changes in social welfare and where people get their money. So if the assumption is that people still need to work to get money, then we will just have to find something else for people to do. Otherwise, we're going to have some massive problems. And yeah, these companies won't have anybody to sell to. Completely agreed.
Yeah. I think there's also something to say of if people just get money without working for it, how does that change what that looks like in terms of spending as well and in the economy in general? Where will that shift really occur? Are people just going to just only buy the essentials? That may backfire for big tech because a lot of these, like for example, I think this is one of the best examples. The business of necessity is the best business, but the businesses that are better are businesses that turned wants into needs. And I think that the iPhone, for example, is one of the best examples. You don't need an iPhone technically, but you do need it, right? It's become so ingrained that you do need it. It's not food, but you can live without it. But it's gotten to the point where it has become a necessity for many people. And when certain products now no longer are necessities, do people just live a very basic life of actual necessity? Either way, I don't think this is a road we want to go down. There's a lot of fear out there right now, and I think a lot of it's warranted. There's a lot of job loss, so I understand and I sympathize with people. So it's tough out there. Yeah, yeah. Anything else to add on this, Andrea? Before we wrap up?
No, yeah, nothing else on this. Yeah, I just, like you said, yeah, I empathize with everybody who's lost a job or who's at risk. And in a way, none of us can be certain that our jobs will stay the same as well. Part of this whole change that we're experiencing is also being open to the idea that, the day after tomorrow, you could be asked to completely pivot. You're not losing your job, but you're losing your professional identity. Like from now on, you have to perform a different role in the same company, same salary, you're still doing well. But if you want to stay, you need to do this other thing instead. And that identity shift can be quite costly from a human personal perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we could wrap up there. Before we do, as usual, I'm gonna include the YouTube channel in the chat. That's the YouTube channel. We post the streams, clips, and I have other streams there as well with other creators. Andrea and I are not quite weekly. We're more maybe bi-weekly every few weeks, but the streams will be there for anybody that joined in the middle or joined towards the end. You can watch the full video. So would appreciate it if you go over there and subscribe. If you want to just go to YouTube and search, just type in exploring ChatGPT live, you'll find the channel. And yeah, that's it. I really appreciate everyone for being here, participating in the chat, and extra appreciate Andrea for joining me on his lunch break. Hopefully, he doesn't go back to work too hungry. And yeah, thank you. And Andrea, I really appreciate you joining me here, man.
And thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
Anytime.
Bye.
Bye.